My name is Daniel, I'm 33, and 3 months ago I found out my parents had been lying to me for 2 years about $500,000. Let me back up. My grandfather built a cabin on Lake Wanahoo back in 1971, 6 acres, hand-built, the kind of place where every board had a story. When he passed in 2019, he left it to my parents, Frank and Carol, with the understanding that it would eventually be split between me and my younger sister Vanessa. I'm the older one. I spent my adult life being the reliable one. I went to community college, then state school, worked full-time the whole way through, and became an electrician. I make decent money, but nothing crazy. I got married at 27 to my wife Priya. We have a 4-year-old named Milo, and we rent a 2-bedroom in Columbus because buying felt impossible with how prices had gotten. Vanessa is 29. She went to a private art school our parents took out loans for. She's had 4 different creative career attempts in the last 8 years, a jewelry business, a photography business, a candle business, and now she does social media management for small businesses, which as far as I can tell means she posts on Instagram for 2 boutiques and calls it a career. She's never once, in her adult life, paid her own rent without help. In late 2022, my parents told me they were selling the cabin. Property taxes on the lake had tripled. They were both retired, and it made sense. They sold it for $410,000. My dad called me and said, almost verbatim, "Once the closing costs and the realtor fees come out and we pay off the home equity line we took against it a few years back, there won't be much left to split. Maybe 15, 20 grand each, if that." I remember being disappointed but not suspicious. My parents had never given me a reason to think they'd lie to me about money. They raised me right, or so I thought. I told them not to worry about it, that the cabin selling was already a loss for all of us emotionally, and money on top of that wasn't the point. For 2 years, nothing came. I asked once, gently, in early 2023, how the estate stuff had settled, and my mom said the home equity payoff had been bigger than expected and there really wasn't anything left. I believed her. I had no reason not to. Then in April this year, Vanessa bought a house. A real house, 4 bedrooms, in a nice suburb outside Cincinnati for $495,000. She put 20% down, that's $99,000. Vanessa, who I knew for a fact had less than $3,000 in savings as of the previous Christmas, because she'd told me so herself while asking to borrow money for Milo's birthday present, somehow had $99,000 sitting around. I asked her at the housewarming party how she'd managed the down payment. She got a weird look on her face and said, "Mom and Dad helped a little." I said that was generous of them, and she said quickly, "Yeah, it wasn't a big deal," and changed the subject to the kitchen renovation she was planning. Something about the way she said it stuck with me, not the words, the speed, the way people talk when they're trying to close a door before you can see what's behind it. I didn't say anything else that day, but that night I couldn't sleep. I kept doing math. The cabin sold for $410,000. Even with a generous estimate on the home equity line, maybe $60,000 to $70,000 and closing costs around $25,000, that still left over $300,000 unaccounted for. My parents had told me there was almost nothing left, and here was my sister, casually dropping $99,000 on a down payment less than 2 years later. I called my mom directly and asked her point blank. I said, "Mom, did you and Dad give Vanessa money for her house?" There was a pause that told me everything before she even opened her mouth. Then she said, "We were going to tell you when the time was right." I asked how much. She said, "It's not really about a number, Daniel. It's about what Vanessa needed at this stage of her life." I pushed. She finally told me. They had given Vanessa $180,000, not just for the down payment. For the down payment plus paying off a car loan and 2 credit cards Vanessa had run up, plus what my mom called a cushion for the move. I asked her directly if that money had come from the cabin sale. She got quiet again, and then she said something I will never forget. She said, "We knew if we told you the truth, you'd feel entitled to the same amount, and honestly, Daniel, you and Priya are stable. You don't need it the way she does." I want to be clear about something. I never asked my parents for a dime in my entire adult life, not once. I paid my own way through school. I never asked for help with my wedding. When Milo was born and money was tight for a few months, I picked up overtime instead of calling home. And the one time in my life there was actual family money on the table, money my grandfather built with his own hands and intended for both of his grandchildren, my parents secretly funneled all of it to my sister and lied to my face about it for 2 years. I hung up the phone. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. Not yet. I just sat there in my kitchen while Priya asked me what was wrong, and I told her, and she went very still, the way she does when she's trying not to say something she'll regret. Over the next 2 weeks, I did something I'm not proud of, but I don't regret it either. I asked my mom to send me documentation, bank statements, closing statements, anything. At first, she refused, said it felt like I was accusing them of a crime. I told her it wasn't a crime, it was my inheritance, and I had a right to understand what happened to it. Eventually, my dad, who had stayed mostly silent through all of this, sent me the closing statement from the cabin sale. The math confirmed it. After the home equity payoff of $61,000 and closing costs of $23,400, the net proceeds were $325,600. Vanessa had received $180,000 of it directly. My parents kept the rest, roughly $145,000, which they later admitted was mostly gone too, spent on a kitchen remodel for their own house and a trip to Portugal for their 40th anniversary. I had received nothing, not $1. I confronted Vanessa directly at the end of May. I asked her calmly if she knew where the money came from. She said she did, and then she said something that genuinely surprised me. She said, "I told them it wasn't fair to you. I told them to at least give you something too." I asked her why she took it then. She said, "Because I needed it, Daniel, and you didn't ask for it, so I figured you were fine." That answer sat wrong with me for a long time, until I realized it was actually the most honest thing anyone in my family had said through this whole thing. Nobody was a villain twirling a mustache. My parents genuinely believed they were being practical, helping the child who needed help more. My sister genuinely believed that my silence meant I was fine, and I had spent my whole life being quietly fine, being the low-maintenance kid, and it turned out that being low maintenance had a cost nobody warned me about. I sat with Priya for a long weekend and we talked through what I actually wanted, not revenge. I wanted acknowledgement, and I wanted something concrete to come from it, because acknowledgement alone doesn't pay for anything. I went back to my parents in June with a clear ask. I told them I wasn't asking for $180,000 because I understood that money was already spent and gone. But I asked for $60,000, roughly a third of what remained available between the two lump sums, structured as a loan from their retirement accounts if they didn't have liquid cash, to go toward a down payment on a house for me and Priya and Milo. My dad initially said no, that it would mean dipping into their retirement in a way they weren't comfortable with. I told him that was strange to hear, given that they'd been comfortable enough to hand my sister $180,000 and take a trip to Portugal, but hadn't been comfortable enough to tell me any of it was happening. That sentence changed something in the room. My mom started crying. My dad went quiet for a long time. 2 weeks later, they came back and agreed to give me $55,000, pulling from an investment account rather than retirement, on the condition that it wouldn't be labeled a loan since they hadn't labeled Vanessa's the same way either. I agreed. It's not the same as what my sister got. It's not equal, and honestly, it never will be, because the trip to Portugal and the kitchen remodel are gone, spent, unrecoverable. But it's something, and more importantly, it's the truth finally sitting out in the open where everyone in my family has to look at it. Priya and I closed on a house 2 weeks ago. 3 bedrooms, a small backyard for Milo, 20 minutes from where we used to rent. My parents came to see it last weekend. My mom cried again, this time I think out of guilt more than anything, and told me she was sorry for how they'd handled it. My dad said less, but he fixed the fence in the backyard without being asked, which from him is basically an apology in physical form. Vanessa and I are still working through it. We talk, but there's a distance now that wasn't there before. I don't think it's permanent. I think it's just what happens when you find out the story you believed about your family wasn't the whole story, and you have to rebuild your understanding of who everyone actually is, including yourself. I used to think being the easy kid, the one who never asked for anything, was a kind of strength. Now I think it just made me invisible in the one moment it actually mattered. I'm not invisible anymore. And, honestly, that's worth more to me than the money ever was.